Hello! Thank you for being in a new video. Here I have in my hands the new RedMagic 9's Pro. Let's unbox it. Let's get started. Remember that these S editions of the RedMagic means that the basic upgrade will be the processor, and this one will be no exception. It is exactly the same as the RedMagic Pro, but with a more advanced processor. Specifically, it is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 leading version. It's an edition that has a slightly higher frequency, but that will be the only difference. It retains the same 6.8-inch AMOLED display, it retains the same version of ice cooling, it retains the triggers with 520 Hz, the fan with 20,000 revolutions per minute, the same cameras, the same charging power, the same 6,500 mAh battery, the same 16 megapixel underscreen camera, and the same RedMagic OS 9.0. So the interesting thing about this unboxing will be the benchmark, but let's take this device out of its box. So, the first thing we come across is this envelope that will contain a little bit more content. Let's take a look. Starting off, we find the key to remove the tray. Later, we will find documents and papers of all life. Nothing very advanced, but something that is nice is to find a cover, which in this case is completely rigid. Well, semi-rigid, I think. The frames do come fully rigid, although they don't protect anything on the sides, just like last generation. So, let's see what else we find. And here's the cell phone right here. Let's take it out. And notice that it will also have a subtle difference in the design, but let's go for the last generation to make it much clearer. Notice the 9S appears here with a dotted font, whereas the last generation says 09 with a completely different font. And obviously the processor signaling, which previously only said Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and gave a reference to its cooling system. And now it only notes Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 leading version with no reference to cooling, although it is still present. In fact, the reference to cooling has now become present on the side of the handset. And now appears the RedMagic logo also present here. Previously, it was in the corner, and something that has definitely disappeared is the brand slogan, "Win More Games." The side remains exactly the same. So in design, only the back cover is the one that changes, but in the rest of the features and its specifications, with the exception of the processor, it will be the same. But let's turn it on so we can run the benchmark. And while it's powering up, let's see what else comes in the box. The 80-watt charger that I was already telling you about with the USB-C connector and the traditional red cable from USB-C to USB-C. So, in this sense, it's also the same as last generation. Let me put this away again and we'll focus on the cell phone. But how about we start testing what you're going to do the most on this cell phone, which is gaming. So for starters, note that for example, real racing could reach 120 frames per second, so you can enjoy all this fluidity that the screen gives you. Definitely, this is not yet started talking about graphics, but there are several games that, as well as this one, manage to reach 120 frames per second to take advantage of the 120 Hz screen that integrates. And remember that this processor also supports ray tracing. So for example, this game that I'm running, for example, is supposed to support this feature. In fact, notice that the graphics settings, we're gonna set it to the highest possible. Although during the game it seems to be running at 30 frames per second, nothing more. It's not a game that I see as optimized in this sense of fluidity. However, it does seem to load some different scenes at some points with a different style of graphics, where it even adjusts to 24 frames per second to give a cinematic effect. And that's probably where we can enjoy these graphics with ray tracing. Although there are still not that many games that take advantage of this feature, but this processor already has these capabilities. Obviously, we also play Call of Duty with a full game, and you know, RedMagic allows you to play at the highest quality possible. In this case, we're going to prioritize the frames per second rate to see if it manages to maintain a consistently high experience. And definitely, when it comes to gaming, we can confirm that indeed this processor is too good in conjunction with the whole cooling system. It manages to give you a pretty loose and smooth gaming experience, while also giving you a good graphics quality, so we confirm that. This device is one of the best when it comes to gaming. Talking about performance issues. In fact, we also played Henshin Impact so you could see more or less how it does. Obviously, we set it to the highest possible graphics quality at 60 frames per second. And notice how it doesn't drop below 60 frames per second at any time. This is really amazing. It maintains what you might call perfect stability, even with the heaviest graphics. You are looking at fast motion scenes of this game, but at times I am putting the game in regular speed so you can see how it at all times maintains 60 frames per second, and evidently, this processor is compatible with several effects that this game has. So, when you're shooting, when there are explosions, you're going to notice that there are ripples in the air, there are interesting reflections. So, definitely this game has very good graphics. Very good graphics, which this cell phone knows how to take advantage of perfectly well. The experience is completely perfect in this case. And after about 15 minutes of playing, we had a maximum temperature of 46 degrees Celsius on the back cover, although it seems to cool down pretty quickly. So, as soon as you stop playing, the whole device is going to drop significantly in temperature after a few seconds. Obviously, it was a pretty demanding test, but it seems that the cooling system does help, so that despite being quite hot, the device never drops in performance. And obviously it has a full suite of features, which in this case comes with new features focused on artificial intelligence. But for starters, notice that on the left side we see the performance modes that we previously knew about, we were already used to. There is a high sensitivity mode to increase the responsiveness of the screen, but there is something curious called free display, which allows us to change the ratio of the game up to a ratio of a group of 2:9 so that you have an ultra wide view. In addition, it lets you move this up or down. And the novelty is that, at least in this game that we tested, it doesn't look like an on-screen cutout or a stretched format, but it actually does look very good. So you can have a much wider preview. It can also come to give you a competitive advantage, although this is probably not compatible with all games, but it's definitely an excellent choice. So, obviously it allows you to play very well. If you activate this mode and you already had your triggers set up, you have to remap them. And you could also get to have a 4:3 view, which is much more square. I don't see it as useful for gaming, but you could do it. There's a feature that will apparently show you if there are enemy footsteps on the screen, although they're getting more and more specialized features that are kind of hard to show. There is another feature called screen extraction, which will allow us to somehow reposition some element that is on the screen so that you can see it somewhere else. For example, if there is some area of a map, you can place it on the other side, although you cannot resize it. But even if you touch something on top of this area of the screen, it will also react. So it's another one of these interesting tools that you're not going to find on other mobile devices. There's another feature called AI Trigger, which allows you to select an image, or you could even take a screenshot of your game. And when it detects that you've reached that area, it can go so far as to activate various functions. For example, it might record the screen for 5 or 10 seconds, or it might trigger a macro, which in turn would trigger a host of actions to shoot or make a special move. You could also start a timer based on this screenshot. So it could be useful and interesting for those games where in certain area you would need to do many actions at the same time. Well, with this tool it could be easier. There is also a data panel that shows you in real time the average number of clicks per second you are doing with the screen and the average multi-finger operation rate per minute. This would simply serve as a way to see how fast you have your fingers when playing, just in case you want to have statistics on how fast you are. There is also a new feature called Gravity X, where apparently you need to connect a gamepad to it. And obviously you have auxiliary lines for different styles of games. You know, there's some sand focus ones, so you can have different benchmarks that you don't usually see in some games. There's another one called Hunting Filter that's going to allow us to have the screen change color. This is very useful for very dark games because with this filter, you will be able to visualize in a better way the darkest areas, and obviously it is also a competitive advantage with which you could annihilate your rivals much more easily. And from there is obviously already everything we already knew, like the button reassignment, so that some buttons in the game, you can place them somewhere else, or you know that the mapping of triggers is also there, an equalizer and a few other elements, but overall it's a device that comes packed with features to make your gaming experience ultra high. For the moment, this has been all for this video. Let me know if you would like a little more in-depth video regarding other specific games, because as I say, the rest of the features are exactly the same and there has only been a small evolution in the processor. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you can let me know, and see you next time.